Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Morse Code Podcast. We're recording from a remote location in the American Great Lakes. Okay, it's Michigan. But we're still talking to people in St. Louis. This week, St. Louis's own Will Smith, the man behind the City Foundry, who is leading a charge to reimagine and reinvigorate St. Louis City. I loved having my conversation with Will. We talked about everything from football to the City Foundry to his vision for St. Louis's future. He is a true visionary. I think you're going to love the conversation. Enjoy hearing from Will Smith. Will Smith, thanks for joining me. I'm excited. I've been bugging you for a minute. I'm excited to have you on. This is exciting. So, I know you well enough to know that you're going to hate when I say this and you're going to correct me, but the man behind the City Foundry was one of St. Louis's premier destinations. I'm super excited to hear about the work that you and New and Found are doing throughout the city to kind of revitalize some of our lost spaces and what your approach to St. Louis City and your vision for St. Louis City is. But let's start out with just walk me through the life story.
All right, life story. Well, like many people in St. Louis, I'm from St. Louis, born and raised here. Um, Went to school down in Atlanta, went to Georgia Tech in Atlanta, studied engineering. By the time I figured out I didn't want to be an engineer, it would have added a few more years of school to change. So I stuck with it and then started working after school with a consulting firm. And I'm sure we'll talk a bit about Foundry, but my dad visiting me upon my college graduation, I brought him to a project in Atlanta called Krog Street Market, and that's eating a hamburger outside was kind of the story as he tells it, where the idea for City Foundry was born, and which was about a decade ago. And so it's been a long project. To those that have seen it come about, it's taken about a decade to get to where we are today.
Hmm.
And so back in 2015, when all of this was happening, I was working in Atlanta and I was working as a consultant down there. And at the same time, I was moonlighting in terms of visiting food halls over the weekend, exploring different developments in Atlanta and throughout the country to do market research. And I kind of realized that um, I wanted to find my way back to St. Louis at some point. And um, my dad, who's an architect turned developer, I probably some of that rubbed off on me, and I wanted to understand how cities came to be. I wanted to understand why Atlanta was growing and thriving, and you just saw towers being, just sprouting up out of the ground. And in St. Louis, it had been a 50-year story of decline. Like, why'd that happen? How'd that happen?
Yeah.
And I decided that before I came back, not knowing at what timeline I would necessarily come back, but feeling like that's something I would want to do at some point, I wanted to get a bit more experience, and I also just wanted to learn. So I ended up going back to school. I went to a grad program at UPenn, and started my grad program there in their city planning program. And while I was there, I had an opportunity to go to the business school and get an MBA. So I like to think about they were on opposite ends of campus, and you had the socialists and the ultra progressives, in the city planning program, and then on the other side of the campus, you had Wharton, which is the mecca of capitalism. And so
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
just go back and forth, between those two different environments, and that was, I think, really good, just exposing me to different ideas. And what I'll say about that experience is I like to think that city planning, from an academic standpoint, taught me the kind of cities we want to build, that we should try to build, that we should
Hmm.
aspire to build. And business school taught me how to finance it, how to pay for all of that, how to get it done, the
Hmm.
myriad different ways um, that we have to think about the actual urban economies and the way in which you can get projects done. So, um, so that was a time period, and what was also great about that experience is I just spent 6 years in Atlanta, and now I was spending 3 years in Philly. So I kind of learned this city of Atlanta, which has basically grown since its founding. It has grown,
Hmm.
and then I had this opportunity to be in Philadelphia, which is the birthplace of our country, and the siting of the Constitutional Congress and whatnot. So, um, history as far back as the country was founded, and how that city has grown, and the differences of that city, and I was fortunate enough to have some experiences, professional experiences in New York City for an affordable
Hmm.
housing investor that invested all over the country, and had a very philosophical um, um, approach to development and impact investing. And then I had the opportunity to work for a developer out of Chicago that was involved in, I'm gonna say, mega projects. I mean, they built full neighborhoods, mixed use neighborhoods,
Oh, wow.
and um, you know projects that neared $1 billion, if not more. So
Mm.
uh, had all these different experiences, and and it was just a phenomenal training ground to then come back to St. Louis, which corresponded with the best time to start a project, not a career, because I had started my career earlier, but best time to start an entertainment food development, which was the pandemic, right? So
Yeah.
came back
Yeah.
right at the start of the pandemic, and Foundry had been pre-leased to about 65% prior to the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit, we basically lost at least half of our tenants, and we lost
Oh.
more or less all the largest tenants that we had. We lost our movie theater, we lost our largest entertainment tenant, we lost our largest office tenant, we lost one of our largest food uh, tenants. The food hall lost half of the tenants that had already signed
Mm.
up. So we had to start over again, and build from you know I like to think we've leased the whole building several times over at this point, and and so that's been a real journey. And so since that time, coming back to St. Louis in 2020, we've built a development business. Has really grown out of the City Foundry project. It's had a history before City Foundry with developments throughout the city. I'm in the Ongat Arts Hotel right now, which was part of my family's development history. But then in 2020, and when I came back, we've been we gave our development company a name. We staffed up. We have a phenomenal team. So there's several people, behind City Foundry at this point, and we started doing projects outside of St. Louis as well, which has been an exciting milestone. So
Uh-huh.
that's just maybe the quick and dirty
Yeah.
time.
So you mentioned coming back to St. Louis and getting going during the pandemic and post-pandemic, giving your development company a name, etc. I think the name itself really speaks to what it seems like you're doing and maybe your approach to development. Can you talk a little bit about New and Found?
Absolutely, and the name was a lot of fun, and just thinking about what encapsulates, our ethos. And we like to say that we see the potential in the world. We see what others can't. The undervalued, the overlooked. That's where New and Found specializes, and the name New and Found um, really refers to that, right?
Hmm.
The City Foundry project, the On God Arts Hotel, like those are all projects that you know other people saw and felt like there was nothing good necessarily to be done or couldn't be done.
Hmm.
In the case of Foundry, the prior development plan was to scrape the entire site, right, and to build
Oh, wow.
basically a more, I'm going to say, suburban styled lifestyle center. Kind
Hmm.
of, a Target. You got some out parcels, a mattress store, some drive-throughs, and a sea of parking. And that I just don't think it would have been the right thing for the context of the city and the built environment in that area. And you certainly couldn't build completely new. You could not recreate what's there. And so why would we get rid of it? I think it's a great example of how we bring together the new and the found together. And our logo is our name is New and Found, but our logo has a plus, right? It's this idea: the
Hmm.
sum of the greater than the parts, and that's what we try to bring to every project.
Yeah. And the Foundry has been evolving since you opened, right? I know you're at it. I know there's a huge residential space that you're adding, and it seems like it's still going. It seems like there's still more on the horizon. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. We have, so we refer to it as phase one of the kind of City Foundry District, as the Foundry as people know it, and then phase two, which is One Foundry Way. But we have phases three, four, and five that we are working on right now as well. And we think there's an opportunity for more residential, and we believe that there's an opportunity for office as well,
Uh-huh.
more retail. The office, the offices that have people in them, they want to be in spaces that have things to do near them.
Yeah.
Have what they say that all the amenities that are more connected to a community, and there's not a lot of places that have that in St. Louis, and our office is 100% full, and we have demand for more that we can't fulfill, and so there's a hope we can get started on some more office soon as well.
Oh, that's great. You know something that I was down there not too long ago, and I was thinking about. I was looking at those raised. I'm not sure what they're called, stanchions or whatever. That used to be like a some sort of rail line, I assume. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It reminded me of the High Line in New York, and I was just thinking about opportunities there.
Well, so that
You're
will
smiling
be.
like you're way ahead of me.
Oh yeah, that will be effectively St. Louis's High Line.
Yeah.
So yeah, Great Rivers Greenway, which has a total trail system throughout the region, right? Their city trail, which the signature city trail, which is under development right now, is called the Brick Line. And there is a path. There's kind of a few different paths throughout the city that are all going to be brought together um, and connected. There's a Cortex side, and I believe it goes to the park. And then on the east side of Foundry, there's a connection at the soccer stadium that goes
Hmm.
all the way to Compton. And so between Compton and Cortex, which is effectively more or less just Foundry, there's going to be the brick line that's going to come through right through there. And one of the reasons why I know this is because Great Rivers Greenway, the organization that's executing this, well, they're one of our office tenants, actually. And
That's
so I
handy.
know it's going to happen. Yep, exactly. And they have funding as well to do a really cool pedestrian bridge between the Foundry and the Armory site through the highway. So you'll
Oh, wow,
also
cool.
connect that as well. So yeah, there's a federal grant that they received to build that,
Huh.
and those the rail spurs that you referred to are purposefully retained, and we continue to build the foundation for future spurs
Hmm.
because that's where we'll have a high line and you'll be able to, if you're in Forest Park, if you're in Clayton, if you're in the Central West End, you'll be able to get to Forest Park, and then from Forest Park you can get contiguously to Foundry and ultimately all the way to the Arch.
Wow. And you mentioned the armory over there. Is that still, is that a big giant question mark? Are you guys the only
I think
ones who are going to be able to re- revive
the
it and save it?
well, we'll see what happens with the Armory. It perhaps is a little bit of a question mark. I do think that you know it's tough to see how that all shook out. It's even more tough that I think people may confuse the Armory with the Foundry, and I
Mm.
commend
Hmm.
Green Street for doing something different and going for it. I think the result obviously was tough, was probably toughest for them than anybody, but
Hmm.
they tried something new, and sometimes they don't work. What I would say though is, we've tried many different things at Foundry. I've been very glad to see that most of them have worked, and we continue to grow. So the only part that sometimes is tough for us is we have to sometimes remind people the Armory is not the Foundry. They're different groups. I do hope that the Armory can be brought back online soon, and contribute more to the overall neighborhood. But we're definitely not waiting for that, and we're continuing to grow.
In the conversations that you and I have had, I've heard you talk a few times. You just mentioned Green Street. You guys, your family and organization, I think, are pretty close to Kransberg. Is that correct? Like, I really appreciate. It's been notable to me the kind of cooperative approach that you seem to have to the city as a whole, developing the city as a whole. And I don't know, behind the scenes, but there doesn't seem to be competitive. It seems to be cooperative. Is there any sort of shared vision that you see?
Um, Shared vision. It's interesting you bring that up because I think there's some healthy debate, and frankly, at times I wish there was more debate around developing a
Hmm.
cohesive shared vision. We can come back to that as well, but I do think that there is a shared commitment. That's probably easier than a shared vision. On a citywide scale, shared vision I think has been a little bit elusive, but I think there is a shared commitment to working together to bring, whether you want to call it economic development or to support population growth or to help improve services. Whatever the role is that the entity is taking. We're not providing. We're not cleaning up trash, right? We have a good
Yeah.
relationship with City Hall right now, which is very nice to have. We try to get along with everybody because we got to work with everybody to help improve the city. So I do think there's a shared commitment there, and then on a neighborhood wide level, I think we do have shared vision. So you mentioned Kransberg Arts Foundation, which between St. Louis University, Kransberg Arts Foundation, and ourselves, it's kind of been those have been some of the three main players doing things in Grand Center. We've been doing things in Grand Center for the last 20 years, and I think people are probably starting to see the result of those efforts. It's a 20-year overnight success, right? And it's not, it's not a success in that, we're done and it's good, but we did have, I think, a really great article. I want to say might have been in Forbes where it was referring to Grand Center as the next up and coming kind of coolest art district in the country,
Hmm.
and that's a big testament to to the Kransberg Arts Foundation, and we're actually right now partnering with them and Old Rock House to develop a concert venue called the Sovereign,
Huh.
and that'll happen on Washington and Grand Center. And so that's a really great example of a project that, to get it done, we had to partner with all these different groups to get it done. Um, and so that's been a fun project. And same thing with Foundry. You know, with Foundry, it's been great. We developed a phenomenal partnership with Gerard Kraft on several of
Hmm.
the concepts at Foundry, and it's been great to work with him. And I think he's done a great job with his concepts, and um, it's really brought people together.
That's
So.
great. It's interesting hearing you talk about these projects and what sort of excites you about them and where you want to see them go, especially when you compared and contrasted it to another vision for Foundry, which was just essentially a strip mall. I think is not those weren't the words you used, but not far off.
I still have
Uh,
to work with the group that
my
had planned
words,
it. So
not
I
yours.
gotta be kind about the words. Yeah.
Sure. Um, but you built this thing, and Foundry is an example, but not the only one. And then you immediately went to work building a community around it and thinking about the lived experience of someone either visiting the Foundry or living in the Foundry or working at the Foundry. And I'm sure your education in city planning comes into to play, probably just who you are as a person. But I I think it benefits St. Louis a lot to be thinking of these developments not as a place where people come, spend their money, watch a show, or get a meal and then take off. It's just an interesting and helpful approach, I think.
Yeah, so I'm a resident of downtown St. Louis, and I'm a resident for a couple of reasons. One, I'm a resident um, because I like living in, I'm going to say, urban environments. I like living where it's walkable. I like that we live on the 17th floor. I love waking up in the morning and just kind of being able to look out, and um, I like not having to take care of a yard. I got a lot of things I got to do. Taking care of a yard is not something I have to worry about. It's very nice.
Sure.
Um, I also live down there because, we are so involved and invested in the city, and we could spend a little bit of time talking about downtown, but I really wanted to experience it firsthand. Um, and it's one thing to kind of sit there and criticize or share opinions and whatnot, and if you're basing all those opinions off of news headlines, it's one thing. If you're basing that opinion because you live there and you've experienced that and you deal with it every day, I think it's a little bit different. So I work downtown, I live downtown. Um, but what I would say, the reason why I brought that up with what you were saying is, we not to get overly academic, but we need a healthy urban economy and an ecosystem, and that involves lots of different ways in which people use space. So
Hmm.
we can look at it at a much more micro focused example at Foundry, for example. So someone's going to come during the day for food, right? For the food hall. Then someone's going to come to go to the movies. Someone's going to come to go to the grocery store. Someone's going to come to celebrate, a coworker or a friend, a family member, and go to Putt Shack and for a birthday party, right? Someone's going to come to go to a city winery show. Someone's going to come to work out in the morning at True Fusion. And then we have all of our shops there as well. And all of those different uses are bringing people at different times for different reasons, and you you can sustain um, a business because it has all those different uses. If you think about like a sports stadium, they don't have a lot of times the concessions aren't open when the stadium's not open. Why? Because there's nobody there,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's difficult to have retail next to a sports stadium because it's just a boom and bust kind of cycle. And we try to
Uh-huh.
create this environment where there's always something going on. You add then the residential, and now you have a completely different type of customer that's there, that's helping to round it out more. And that's why we have 100,000 square feet of office in there and several hundred employees of office there that's there every day, because that's bringing another kind of use. So, Foundry that's the whole mixed use environment. And that's just what a city is. A city is a
Yeah.
mixture of uses. And so between downtown and City Foundry, it is, you get into this game of kind of what are the different puzzle pieces that we have to bring together, and how do they support one another, and that's where all the fun debate comes in. But in the case of City Foundry, that debate is coupled with real financial impact, which is
Yeah.
fun, but also, the impact of your decisions, you feel it. So,
Yeah. Do you feel stress about that in your day-to-day life?
I did. I definitely had to. Um, I had to adapt pretty quickly. And even when I say quickly, it took me a few years to adapt. There was definitely a period of time. I mean, like I said, owning a hotel or being a part of a family and committing myself to tying family and business and career and and everything together. Um, when your family owns a hotel and owns an entertainment, food and beverage retail destination, going through the biggest economic disruption of that type of business, it can be a little stressful.
Yeah.
And we really have had just kind of everything thrown our way, and we've been able to press forward. So it's taken a
Uh-huh.
bit of getting comfortable with discomfort. It's taken a bit of philosophical, metaphysical fortitude, I'll say, and just
Sure.
being able to, I'm able to sleep at night, which is nice.
Yeah.
But it did take a little bit to get there.
Well, you also on an individual personal level, you got thrown into the deep end, right? I mean, you came in and pretty much immediately started taking what had been a successful business in one sector and adding to it and taking it in a different direction. I know it wasn't necessarily all you, but it, I imagine it would have felt like a trial by fire.
Yeah, I can agree with that. The when I had signed up, to be very specific, when I had signed up to come back and work with family, the very specific, and this was 2019 when I agreed that this would be kind of the next phase in my career. The uh, the businesses that I would be responsible for were all of our hospitality businesses. So going into 2020, it was like we got a restaurant, we got a catering and event business, we have a hotel, we're doing the food hall at City Foundry. All of those businesses were within my purview, and
Hmm.
the sky's the limit. Nothing can go wrong. A lot can go wrong, and there's no roadmap for how to work through those things. And you try,
Yeah.
and I made mistakes, and I made poor decisions, and you just have to learn from it, realize you're going to do that, and just keep going. I mean, there's not really an option to do that. I actually just had this experience where we actually had decided to build out a coffee shop actually at Foundry, and the coffee shop was the strategy was is coffee shops, third spaces, bringing people together. Let's build a coffee shop, and we've seen other real estate companies do this, and we love taking ideas from other places. So a real estate company creates a brand for a cafe concept. They put it in their own real estate and build the brand, and then they can take that brand and they can put it in their other real estate, their other office buildings and their apartment buildings. And so the idea was, is let's build this coffee shop. Well, it didn't work the way that we thought it would work, um, and and so we had to pivot, and now we have a different tenant in the space, and so that was a lesson learned. It was it was difficult personally because it was something that I had started and was proud of and was excited to do, and then when it didn't work, it's you don't really have the choice to just say to just ignore it. You have to figure out a solution, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what we've done. So I didn't have the choice then, and I didn't have the choice in 2020 and 2021. So definitely a
Yeah.
trial by fire.
Yeah. Yeah. This might sound like my community question all over again, but I'm also, you're talking about Grand Center, um, and my last guest who I had on was Brian Walsh, who's a co-founder of Twisted Arts Collective. He's the artist coordinator of Paint Lewis. He's a longtime St. Louis artist, and he was talking a lot about the St. Louis art scene, St. Louis, you know, cultural scene more broadly, um, and it feels to me like the beating heart of a city is its cultural scenes, and it's sort of like in some cases artistic subcultures and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach developing in such a way that it kind of nurtures that?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it just dawned on me, and as you were talking about the art scene and culture, that our culture is maybe what we create that's unique to a place, whether
Uh-huh.
that's the architecture, right? What we made in terms of the built environment, whether that's the art that's being made, whether that's the food that's being made or the performances that are being made. It's what we create as a community, and I think that's why it's been so important for us, especially with the food, that it is reflective of entrepreneurs that are from here that are connected with this place that we all love. We've tried to do that in the small business and retail. I would say it's really difficult. When people say shop local, I mean, it is really difficult to be successful in a small business, right? You're taking a chance, and
Mm-hmm.
you think there's a market out there for it, and sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong, but
Yeah.
you're taking that risk. And so I do think that the things that remain after going through all of that and are reflective of our culture, and we've tried to bring that to Foundry. We had these live art market series and earlier in the spring, and we're gonna bring those back in the fall. We're taking just a little break during the hottest months of the year, but that's been something we really want to be able to show. And I think the other thing that's interesting is there is so much in St. Louis that's happening that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not aware of no one's aware of everything that's happening, right? And one of the things that we've always tried to do is we've tried to be a space where people know that they can come here. They don't need to know what's happening. They just can know that if they come to Foundry, they will experience something either new, or they'll experience um, part of that culture that maybe they didn't know about before. And so that's something that's been a part of how we've tried to curate the tenants or curate our programming. Um, and Paint Lewis is actually a group that we've worked with and that we hope
Hmm.
to do more work with. So
Yeah, I mean, what they do is amazing. It's truly unique. It's one of those things that people all over the country know, and uh, I
did you
love that.
know about it before you did you know about
No,
the wall and everything that they do down there?
no. So when I moved back to St. Louis, and all of a sudden, I hadn't lived in St. Louis since I was 23. And I came back to St. Louis as not a 20 something who was going down to what was then Mississippi Nights and seeing shows, but now as a father of four. And I was like, you know, I, I knew that I had a lot of catching up to do, and I wanted to just like get to know St. Louis again, um, not only in a way that would speak to my interests, but also that would still kind of like, light different fires in my kids' brains, rather than just going to the trampoline park down on Manchester Road. um, and and so yeah, we just embarked on this like let's get to know St. Louis adventure. And at the time, it really felt like this amazing hidden gem. And I would take my kids down there, and we would just like spend an afternoon walking the wall, like just on a random day. And then we went down for our first Paint Louis we were in town for, and got to watch it all happen, and it was incredible. And yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things that makes me really proud of St. Louis. Paint Louis, um, Skate Laborious, which was incredible. Just like those are two of I feel like the best, and it's hard to talk about Skate Laborious because of the fire, but um, those are two things, and there's more than that, but those are two things that just make me feel like this place is special, and I want more of that, and I want more people to know about that.
I didn't really know St. Louis until I came back, you know.
Yeah, same.
And I
You
think,
don't know it as a kid,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. I mean, my growing up, I kind of glossed over like my time in St. Louis before I left. But, in high school, I played sports, and, my life was revolved around sports and everything there. And I can't necessarily think about even, I'm going to say the obvious things to have gone to, like the zoo or you know, the art museum. Like I know I went as a kid, but like I don't remember it in a meaningful way. And they're obvious in the sense that they're in Forest Park. They're very accessible and they're world renowned, right? But then, yeah, Skate Laborious, Paint Lewis, the what the Kranzbergs are doing in Grand Center, the Black Box Theater that they have down there, and what's happening there, and the Shakespeare in the Park. That's happening not just in Forest Park over the summer, but kind of all over the place. And my wife and I have
Huh.
gone to Muni now all the time. I mean, it's incredible all the different, um, all the different, not just activities, but cultural experiences, um, prominent and underground. I'll say that
Yeah.
you can find, um, and kind of getting reacquainted with your hometown, your city, if you will. I've always been proud of being from St. Louis, almost because I think that's just you grow up just believing that you should be proud of where you're from, right? And
Yeah.
but it wasn't until coming back. that I was like, wow, this is a really cool place. And
Yeah.
I'm proud to be here for all these reasons. So
Had it changed in the time you were gone until you came back? Did it feel different?
I think it felt different. Yeah, it definitely it's felt different. I'm trying to
Hmm.
think of exactly how and why I would describe that it felt different. I mean, growing up, when you're a kid, you kind of you're not making well, some kids are, but in my case, I wasn't making a lot of active decisions around where I wanted to be,
Yeah.
right? You're um, uh, you're just you're reacting almost more than making decisions, and so deciding to be here, deciding where I want to live, deciding what I want to do on any given weekend, and how I want to spend my time, and who I want to spend it with, and all of those decisions have brought me and exposed me to these different experiences. And I will say that it's been I think, a blessing of my career and my role, my job on a day to day, that part of what we've tried to do with Foundry and bringing all these different experiences together and all these food places together and retail places together has been the journey of trying to find those concepts and bring them
Hmm.
to Foundry, bring them to a space that other people can experience for themselves. And so that's been fun. I mean, a lot of the places I've found myself have been in part because I'm trying to find tenants, I'm trying to find cool experiences. And that's been a really fun way to relearn, be reintroduced to St. Louis. So anything I should go look at? I mean, what would you say are the new cool spots you've been
Oh shit, man!
seeing that
Don't
I
put me
need
on
to
the
check
spot. I live in the county. So Brian Walsh, who is my again the guest from my last episode, is not only a co-founder of Screwed Arts, but also the owner and founder of 15 Windows Gallery, and they have a very cool show that's up right now, which we were in while we were recording. And I mean, it's down on Cherokee Street, and it's just like, one of my favorite things is just you talked about sort of the magic of a city and what makes a city, all of which I agree with. One of my favorite ways to experience a city is just to stumble upon things, and so Cherokee Street's a great place to do that. Grand Center is a great place to do that. U City is a little different than it was when I was growing up, but there's still opportunities there. Um, uh, and I think that the way you approach the work of developing is great for that because it builds little centers that have some obvious destinations and also some unexpected things, as you kind of spoke to, of just like there's always, you may not know what's going on, but there's something going on. And I think that is great and important. You mentioned growing up playing sports, and I was a little mad at you because you were doing the backstory, and I was like, you got to mention Georgia Tech. Can you talk about that part of your experience?
Yeah, so in St. Louis in high school, I played football, I wrestled, I rode crew for a couple of years. It was like had to sample everything. I think my senior year we got like a lacrosse team for the first time, and it couldn't be a varsity because it was like the first year. It had to be a JV, and so all the football players, all the senior football players, of which I was one of them, decided we would join the JV lacrosse team
Oh
in the
God.
spring that year, and that was probably tough for some of the teams we played, especially because we went to the state championship in football, and so um, we had a lot of fun.
So a pretty
In
physical JV lacrosse team.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It was a bunch of seniors getting one last hurrah in there. And then it was a bunch of freshmen, like actual lacrosse players that were very good, that had been the advocates for getting the program. And it
Uh-huh.
was just a funny combination uh, of of teammates. But then I went
Did you
to
play
Georgia
both
Tech.
ways in high school? Sorry.
I did. Yeah, I did. We were a small school and 50 guys a class roughly and so yeah, everyone had to play both ways. So,
Uh-huh.
but my high school had, there's two NFL players that played high school with that I played high school with even at a small school. Um,
I
uh,
don't know where you went. Where'd you go?
I went to John Burroughs. So I
Okay.
had Ezekiel
I should
Elliott
have known that.
and Foye Aluakan, and then
Uh-huh.
um, and then in college I had the opportunity to uh, to try out for the Georgia Tech football team, which was really a flyer. I mean, I remember just hearing about it in the hallway, and I was like, yeah, why not? I mean, I hadn't joined a fraternity, so I was like, yeah, sounds interesting. Try that. So yeah, because I was an engineer, and it's not like I had free time on my hands. Um,
Yeah, right.
oh. So I I did a tryout. It was you didn't even touch a football in the tryout. It was a broad jump. It was a 40-yard dash. It was the pro agility shuttle, kind of back and forth, and it was a high jump.
Uh-huh.
That was the
Huh.
tryout,
Like
and
an actual high jump? Were you flipping
like
over
no, not
backwards?
no, no, no.
Oh, is
This
the you test your vertical, you
the
jump up and
Yeah,
yeah.
test your vertical. Yeah, yeah. So the funny thing about it is, I played in high school. I played running back. I've
Next to Ezekiel Elliott?
yeah. Next to him, I mean, he was a couple years behind me, so
Okay.
I was in the rotation, but um, I played running back. I've always been one, going into development. I've always been one comfortable with risks. Growing up, I was a motorcycle. I rode motorcycles. My dad and I still ride motorcycles. We ride on the street. We ride off road. We were riding off road together last weekend. He's in his 60s and still races motorcycles um, and so I've always been comfortable with risk. I've always been comfortable with kind of, I'm going to say, uh, you know, uh, impact sports, and motorcycling doesn't need to be an impact sport, but it very well can become that if you don't
Sure.
ride properly, and especially off road. So I've always been comfortable kind of being knocked around a little bit, and I was a running back in high school, and part of the reason was because, um, uh, I don't have very big hands, which is fine, and for some reason in Georgia Tech they felt like I'd be very well suited for wide receiver. And so I was a wide receiver at Georgia Tech.
Uh-huh.
Didn't know this at the time, but well, I knew this before joining the team, obviously, and trying out. But in high school and then going to Georgia Tech, I didn't know this. They were a triple option team at the time, so
Okay.
their wide receivers didn't catch that
Yeah.
frequently, anyways. Uh, so yeah, I joined the team. The spring of my freshman year, I was on the team all 4 years of being there, but only three actual seasons. And yeah, the first year we went to the Sun Bowl. The second year we went to the Music City Bowl. We lost both of those, and the third year we went to the Orange Bowl and we won the Orange Bowl. So I got one of the best seats in the house for the Orange Bowl. We also beat our rivals that year too, which was it was a lot of fun. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Uh wow. So you walked on at Georgia Tech. after playing running back and what? I'm going to guess linebacker, safety.
Yeah, outside linebacker. Yeah.
Yeah. And now you're running deep routes. You must have had a good tryout. You must have had a good 40 time.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was, but yeah, I also I think um, I was probably a good um, I like to say I would have made all American scout team, not a real metric or award there, right? But
Sure.
that's what the walk-ons did. They got the first team ready, right? You got to learn the
Yeah.
plays. You had to learn the plays of the other team. You had to get the starters ready, and that's what we did. So I could definitely do that and give them a good run for their money. So
Yeah. That's great. And so this whole time you were studying to be an engineer and playing D1 football. How was that managing the schedule? I never understand how people come out of a D1 program with like a legit degree because it's insane. The schedule's insane, right?
yeah, it was difficult to balance at times. What do they say? You can have, you can get good grades, you can have a social life, and you can sleep, and you can only pick two, right? And
Uh-huh.
I would say, I didn't sleep a lot. The social
Wow.
life, I substituted the social life for the football team. I mean, it also was it was a big team. I was over 100 people, right? And so, those are, my friends from college, um, and so I had that, and I went to the class, and I went to work out. That's all I did. Um,
Uh-huh.
Although I did work in a sorority house for 2 years. That was also an interesting. Yeah,
What did you do there?
I was one of their kitchen employees. So I worked in their kitchen. I thought it was a great deal. I got paid, I got free food, and I got to meet a bunch of girls, and I didn't have to be, in Greek life to do it. So I thought it
Yeah.
was a pretty good gig. So
Sounds like it. That's
yeah.
great. So you
So
talk it's interesting to hear you talk about that part of your life and about sports more generally. Um, you almost make it sound like a past life, like a distant memory. Is it part of your sort of is it on your radar now? Are you at some point gonna bring an NFL team back? What's the does it play into
I mean,
anything for you?
I would say my general athleticism is absolutely a past life. Maybe my dad ran like 7 marathons. One of my sisters has run a few marathons. Maybe I have a marathon in me. We'll see. We'll see if
Uh-huh.
I can pull that off at some point. But um, uh, yeah, I don't spend a lot of time watching sports.
Uh-huh.
And that's probably a function of just the the pressures that I feel on my time, um, and uh, I always enjoyed playing sports, but I never really got into being a fan. So
Uh-huh.
there's that a bit of that disconnection there, which you may not
Yeah.
expect, coming from St. Louis with the teams that we have and everything. And I certainly am a fan of the teams. I'd say culturally, but not necessarily from the standpoint of knowing every player and following every single thing that's happening with them and everything that's going
Yeah.
going with them. So please don't quiz me on any current
Yeah, I'm
sports
not gonna.
sports events.
No, I 100% get that. When I was actively playing and shortly after I was actively playing after graduated from college, I had kind of a hard I had kind of a hard time watching, especially watching football. Um, And especially for probably the first 5 years after I graduated from college, because I was always like, I could do that. Could I do that? I wonder if I could, and I was just, and then I did a bit of coaching, and then, my coach brain would take over, and it was just hard to be a spectator. It was interesting.
Yeah, I definitely felt that in the early part of after graduating. I didn't really go to many games, and it was always like, seeing my teammates, you would kind of have that nostalgia and kind of feel like, man, it would be awesome to be back there.
Uh huh.
We did go, my wife and I did go back for homecoming uh, last year, and they had a recognition of our year because it was 10 years since the Orange Bowl win.
Uh huh.
And so we got to go down and we got to go onto the field and, wave at everybody and everything. And that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun
Uh
to
huh.
see my teammates, um, yeah, that was a lot of fun. Brought back a lot of great memories.
Yeah, that's great. Did she? She didn't. Did she go to Georgia Tech also, or
No,
did you
we
meet?
did meet. We met here in St. Louis, both from
Uh huh.
here. Really interesting kind of, ships passing in the night situation until, she likes to say, the right moment. So we
Yeah.
both grew up here. She was a cheerleader, and we figured out that she was a cheerleader. I wrestled in high school, and she was a cheerleader at some wrestling tournaments that I was definitely at, and um, then I lived in Atlanta, and she ended up becoming a flight attendant. And so she got trained. She was
Huh.
working at Delta, and she lived in Atlanta, for a period of time as working for Delta. And then I was in New York for a little bit of a short stint, but it was at the same time she was in New York when she was, working
Wow.
at Delta. So we kind of worked in the same cities. We were in the same cities at the same time. Never knew the other person, and then met each other when we both had come back to St. Louis, um, and got married last not this past April, but the April before. So yeah, it's
That's
been
cool.
it's
That's
been
great.
it's been fun to be here. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. As you know, I always enjoy talking to you, and I always appreciate your approach to your work and to the city. And frankly, I think that it's you're in a good position. I don't want to say lucky. I don't want to say privilege, but it's an envious position to be doing work that you can see the impact of. Like, you can see how it's impacting the city directly and the people who are experiencing it. And I just think that's really cool. So I appreciate you taking the time.
well, thank you for saying that. I do feel privileged in many ways, and it's been a real blessing to be able to work with my dad for the last 5 years. I see him every day. I feel like I've probably spent more time with him in the last 5 years than the amount of time I spent with him growing up, which, is, it's interesting when
Yeah.
you spend the most time with the people you work with, right?
Right.
And I get to work with him every day, and that's been a real blessing. And it's been wonderful to see, um, gratefully, the positive impact we've had, I think, on the city, and we hope to continue doing that. Um, I think I have, I think I have a couple gray hairs because of it. It's certainly not, it's, it's not,
You're not approaching Morse territory.
no, 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 no. That would be a few more City Foundry like projects,
Yeah, right.
to get me there, I'm sure. But maybe that's what's in my future. So, I might have to catch up. So,
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, thanks again. This was awesome.
yeah, absolutely. Happy to. Thank you so much for your
Game
patience.
over.